The night was long, and the guards patrolling the monastery courtyard later reported hearing a squeal like a pig's before everything fell silent behind the cell door. When they burst in, the bishop was lying on the floor without his pants, his skin glistening with sweat, his eyes darting around the arches as if he saw devils there. There were traces of blood and excrement on the sheets. His breath was wheezing, and a rotten smell came from his mouth as if the flesh was already decomposing inside him. Thus began the last weeks of the English bishop, which were later recorded in the monastery records. His body grew weak, his mind wavered, his spirit sought salvation, but his words were full of malice and fear. The doctor, summoned in the morning, recorded in his report, pulse irregular, tongue white, urine dark, odor heavy. He ordered bloodletting in small portions twice a day, a cup of blood in the morning and evening. At noon, leeches were applied to his temples and armpits, each for a quarter of an hour. Servants rubbed his chest with a salve of lard and crushed garlic 3 times a day and changed the felt pads under his back as the ulcers were beginning to fester. The bishop screamed at every touch, spat, and demanded that psalms be read to him. But a minute later, he yelled that he heard secret mockery in the servants' words. His cell reeked of urine, medicine, and blood. The bed was covered with yellow stains, and the pillows were damp with sweat. The servants later said that they sometimes heard him whispering to himself at night about a conspiracy, claiming that the monks wanted to poison him. Every jug of wine and every bowl of soup was tasted by a special servant who wrote in a book, "Tested, no harm done." But the bishop still suspected tampering and ordered the tasters to be changed every 3 days, fearing a conspiracy. During those days, people from the nobility began to arrive at the monastery. Some hoped to consolidate their influence, while others demanded on behalf of the heirs that they be allowed to see the dying man. The guards were changed in shifts. During the day, people from old families stood at the doors, and at night they were replaced by servants from the new entourage trusted by the bishop himself. This caused quarrels, and reports spoke of fights in the corridors. The keys to the door were kept by the abbot of the monastery, but it was said that there was another key to the secret passage to the cell, which was kept by one of the junior priests. Doctors or scribes were sometimes brought through this passage so that the bishop could dictate letters. The doctors argued among themselves. Some insisted that his illness was caused by internal decay and ordered that the bloodletting be increased to 3 times a week. Others believed that evil spirits were harming him and advised burning incense in his cell and reciting spells. So every night, candles burned in the cell, their smoke mingling with the stench of a rotting body. At dawn, he was given a pinch of opium powder to ease his suffering, and at night, 2 spoonfuls of poppy syrup. But even then, he tossed and turned and cried that he saw the flames of hell at his bedside. His confessions were heavy. He demanded that the priests come every day and listen to him, but he did not repent, complaining instead that his enemies would not bow down before him. He promised to give the monastery his land, then threatened to take it away from them. He swore that he would execute all heretics, but an hour later, he asked for mercy for some, as if afraid of provoking the wrath of heaven. The abbot's notes say, his words were disordered like his mind. He swore by God, and in the same moment cursed him. His body continued to change. His legs were covered with sores. The skin on his heels cracked and oozed pus. Doctors wrote, "The smell from the wounds is unbearable. The sweating is incessant, and he urinates without restraint." servants often found him lying on the floor, having torn off his bandages, and with difficulty lifted him back onto the bed, tying him down with straps. Under the sheets, they found crumbs of dried blood and yellow crusts. Meanwhile, the political games around him intensified. The old nobility demanded recognition of an heir to prevent chaos. The new entourage played for time, hoping to extract the last signatures and orders from the bishop. Envoys from 2 neighboring countries secretly passed notes to the abbot, each promising protection for the monastery if their candidate received the blessing of the dying man. Whispers filled the corridors, and nightly meetings were held in the refectory to argue over who would be allowed to see him in the morning. Weeks passed. Every night was like a siege. Servants with bowls of water, doctors with knives and leeches, guards at the doors, and the bishop himself, tied to his bed, but still able to shout orders and summon scribes. His cell became both a prison and a hospital ward. The stench, the blood and the cries, that is how witnesses who were allowed inside described his condition. But his body held out, even though the doctors had already written 3 times in their reports that the end was near. Each time he survived, and each time it seemed like torture for everyone around him. By the end of the 2nd week, his skin was no longer attached to his legs. The sores on his thighs and shins were spreading, oozing a cloudy fluid with the smell of decay. The servants who changed his bandages fainted from the stench, and the abbot ordered them to inhale vinegar so they would not fall directly into the cell. The bishop, noticing this, began to laugh hoarsely and shouted that they feared him more than the devil himself. The doctor's report for that day read, bloodletting in the morning with a cup, leeches applied to the stomach for a quarter of an hour, cauterization of the shoulder at the site of a purulent ulcer to no avail. Anointment of lard and crushed garlic was applied 3 times. Pulse, barely perceptible, wheezing, black urine, profuse sweating, extremely foul odor. Despite all this, he still dictated orders to the clerks, demanding that all papers be rewritten twice because he suspected them of forgery. At night, he was shaking with fever. He called for priests and whispered that he saw monks under his bed, whom he had ordered to be executed for heresy 10 years ago. He cried and swore that he would give all his property to the monastery if only these people would disappear. But in the morning when he woke up, he cursed again and demanded that the extra witnesses be sent away from the monastery, threatening to burn them at the stake. The cell resembled a barracks. 2 shifts of guards were on duty at once, men of old families and soldiers of the new regime. Quarrels broke out between them, and once it came to blows, one knight drew a dagger, and only the abbot stopped the bloodshed. A report sent to London stated, "The patient's condition is causing disorder. Each side wants access to obtain a signature or a word." The chosen ones continued to be brought in through a secret passage. One night, 2 scribes were brought in to rewrite the will. It was said that the bishop, in his delirium, had left his lands to one family. But in the morning, when he was clear-headed, he ordered the papers to be destroyed. During the day, he blessed the heir from the family of the old lords. But at night, he demanded that power be transferred to the supporters of the new entourage. The confusion of his words allowed each camp to claim that it was they whom the dying man had recognized. Medicine brought no relief. Bloodletting continued twice a day, and leeches were applied more and more often, even to his neck and under his knees. At dawn, he was given a grain of opium to keep him calm, but this often caused even greater delirium. He whispered that he could hear angels singing, and then immediately called the servants in terror, insisting that it was a choir of demons. At night, he was given 2 spoonfuls of poppy syrup, but his sleep was short and restless. He screamed, tugged at his straps, and beat his back against the bed, breaking his nails. His body became alien to him. Ulcers opened on his back, under his shoulder blades, and the doctors wrote, "Pus is flowing, the skin is red and hot, there is a smell of death." To hide the stench, herbs were burned continuously in the cell, but this only intensified the stuffiness. The priests came out with red eyes and coughing, and many refused to go in anymore, citing illness. The monastery's population lived on rumors. People whispered in the corridors that the bishop had been punished for his sins, found without his pants in his cell, and that his death would be a sign from God. Some believed that he should be left without confession, while others insisted that without his blessing, the question of inheritance could not be decided. In the markets of the neighboring town, people were already saying that the bishop was a sorcerer and that his body was rotting alive as punishment. The ambassadors of 2 neighboring countries secretly sent reports to their kings. One wrote, "He is living out his last days, but his every word is being transcribed and interpreted. The fate of England is being decided around his rotting body." Another claimed, "He is still dangerous, for even in his delirium he demands executions and excommunications." In the 3rd week, he began to have bloody diarrhea. Servants carried out basin after basin of foul-smelling liquid and wrote in their reports, "The discharge is dark, mixed with mucus and blood, and the smell is extremely foul." His skin turned yellow, his eyes became cloudy, and he was losing his sight. The doctors no longer knew what to do. One suggested burning the ulcers with a red-hot iron, and this was done. He screamed so loudly that the walls shook, but the ulcers did not close, only turned black. Despite this, he continued to cling to power. Every day, he demanded that books with seals and letters be brought to him. He left trembling scribbles on them, making crosses that no one could decipher. These crosses were then copied, claiming that they were his signature. Thus passed the 2nd month of his illness. His cell became a place of fear, stench, and endless intrigue. Those who left him said, "He looks more like a corpse than a living person, but he still commands, still holds power in his hands." By the beginning of the 3rd month, the bishop's illness had become unbearable for both him and those around him. His body was rotting before their eyes. The sores on his legs had grown so large that the servants could no longer change his bandages without vomiting. Pus seeped through the sheets and felt, and everything had to be burned because the smell was impossible to remove. The doctors reported, "The pus is foul-smelling, yellowish-green, mixed with blood. The smell is so strong that it makes breathing difficult." Bloodletting no longer brought relief, but continued. Twice a week, half a cup of blood was drained from him. Leeches were placed not only on his temples, but also on his groin and inner thighs. Cauterization was performed on specific points in the abdomen, but the ulcers only spread. At dawn, he was still given a grain of opium, but instead of calming down, he began to rave louder. The priests wrote, "He calls out to the dead, hears footsteps behind the wall, sees flames, and swears that devils are holding him by the legs." At night, they gave him poppy syrup, 2 spoonfuls at a time, but he slept for no more than an hour. The cell resembled a torture chamber. Bunches of dried herbs hung on the walls, and under the bed were basins of water into which pus-filled liquid drained. Charred irons used for cauterization lay on the floor. In the corner stood a book, stained with blood, which he had ordered to be kept close at hand for new orders. Servants tied him to the bed with straps because he jerked, tore off bandages, scraped scabs off his ulcers with his fingernails, and threw them in the faces of those who cared for him. His mind was completely broken. During the day, he would yell at the servants, accusing them of conspiracy, and in the evening, in a delirium, he would fall to his knees and weep, begging for forgiveness. The abbot wrote, "He changes every hour. One moment, he threatens to kill everyone. The next, he promises alms. Then he demands that I will be drawn up immediately and orders it to be burned." The intrigue around him intensified. The old families insisted that his will be recorded officially. His new entourage brought in their scribes and slipped papers to him at night, taking advantage of his unconscious state. One of the scribes later confessed. He held the pen, but wrote not letters, but lines. We interpreted this as a sign and affixed seals. Rumors spread that there were already several wills, each favorable to different groups. The guards in the corridors no longer hid their animosity. Shift changes turned into clashes, and the sound of swords could be heard. One night, 2 people were killed right outside the cell door. The abbot ordered the bodies to be removed through a secret passage so as not to disturb the sick man. Reports said, "The monastery has become a camp. Every step of the dying man is covered in blood." Servants began to disappear. Some were transferred, others were found dead in the garden. It was said that they were being removed because they could testify to the bishop's condition. The same abbot wrote, "The sick man is screaming louder and louder, but his voice is already weak. The smell of his body is more frightening than his words." His confessions turned into a stream of delirium. He confessed to debauchery while cursing the monks for daring to remind him of it. He said that he would be found without pants at the last judgment, and then everyone would learn of his sins. He swore that he had seen angels writing down his every word and immediately spat on the crucifix. The priests left pale and silent, many of them refusing to enter his cell again. Meanwhile, his body became a source of infection. Several servants fell ill with fever and began to cough. Doctors wrote, "The smell of decay and stench is spreading throughout the monastery. People are fainting." Rumors spread that the very ground beneath his cell was saturated with death. Ambassadors from neighboring countries desperately demanded news. One wrote, "If he dies without a clear will, war will break out." Another, "His living corpse is already being used as a tool for conspiracies. Every hour of delay benefits only those who hide the papers in seals." The bishop still gave orders. He demanded executions, demanded that the monks bring the servants out into the courtyard and beat them with rods. He could barely lift his hand, but still threatened everyone with his finger. Those who saw him said, "He is no longer a man, but not yet dead." Thus began the 3rd month of his agony. He was surrounded by stench, delirium, and conspirators who were already dividing his power while he was still alive. By the end of the 4th month, the disease had made him helpless. He no longer got out of bed. His legs were so badly affected that the doctors wrote, "The tissue on his shins has died, the ulcers are deep, and there is a smell of decay. The skin on his stomach turned yellow and his hands turned black. His face was covered with grey spots and his eyes were cloudy. He was completely blind in his right eye. and could see only vague shadows with his left. Servants noted that he often turned toward the wall, thinking that someone was standing there. The bleeding became less frequent, once every 3 days, because the blood was difficult to extract from his body. They stopped using leeches because his skin would not hold them. They replaced cauterization with rubbing him with a salve made of lard, garlic, and crushed juniper, but the ulcers did not heal. Opium was now given twice a day, a pinch in the morning and in the evening, but he did not fall asleep, only muttered. Poppy syrup caused vomiting. The doctors wrote, "The pulse is barely perceptible. Breathing is heavy. The tongue is black. Urine is scarce, and the smell is extremely strong." The cell became a living tomb. The sheets and felt had to be changed twice a day, but they were still soaked with blood and pus. Basins with secretions stood under the bed. The air was heavy, and the walls reeked of death. Priests began to enter only with their faces covered. Some later wrote that the smell was like that of an open grave. His voice was almost gone. He whispered, and the scribes leaned close to his face to catch his words. These words were later interpreted in different ways. Some claimed that he had blessed the heir of the old lords. Others swore that he had transferred power to a new entourage. In the darkness of the cell, papers with seals were produced, each contradicting the other. The guards no longer hid their hatred. One night, 2 groups clashed, right in the corridor outside the door. 2 were stabbed to death, and another died from his wounds in the morning. The abbot wrote, "The monastery is standing on blood. The bishop is still breathing, but everyone around him is already fighting for his place." The servants began to refuse to care for him. They said that his body was spreading disease, and that 3 people had already died of fever. Then the abbot ordered that peasant boys be brought to change his clothes. They were forced to do so under threat, and they cried when they were made to carry away the festering rags. The bishop completely lost touch with reality. He called out to his dead relatives, argued with them, shouted at them, then begged them. He said he could smell fire and fought against his restraints until he tore the skin on his hands. The doctors noted mind in disorder, delirium unceasing, eyes without light. But even in this state, his name was used. Papers with his will were scattered throughout the camps of the nobility. Some presented a cross drawn on a sheet of paper as proof. Others showed entire texts, as if dictated by him, although he could not say more than 3 words in a row. Ambassadors from neighboring countries wrote, "He is still alive, but already dead. His breath serves as a shield for some and a pretext for others." And yet no one dared to declare what was happening to be his death. As long as he gasped and twitched in his straps, the struggle continued. The abbot noted, "We fear him. We fear his smell. We fear his eyes. We fear his voice. But most of all, we fear that when he dies, a storm will sweep us all away." People almost stopped entering his cell. Servants only left water and food, but he did not touch it. His lips were cracked, his tongue was swollen, his teeth were loose and falling out. A rag soaked in blood and pus always lay under his head. His body became immobile, and he only moved his hand occasionally. But even this movement caused horror among those present. By the 4th part of his agony, he was already like a living mummy, breathing, stinking, but devoid of human form. And yet they continued to keep him as the center of power. By the 5th month, his breathing became rare and wheezy. He no longer opened his eyes. His body was covered with dark spots, and the skin on his hands and feet had split open. The doctors recorded tongue black, breathing intermittent, pulse imperceptible. He lay motionless, the straps no longer necessary. Servants only occasionally held a rag soaked in vinegar to his nose, but there was no reaction. On the eve of his death, he was confessed for the last time. The priest wrote, "There were no words, only moans. We said prayers, but he did not respond. During the night, he let out a long rattle, after which his chest stopped moving." The abbot's report states, "At midnight, the bishop stopped breathing. Death came in a stench and without words. When they tried to lift the body, the sheets stuck to the skin. The servants struggled to separate them, and pieces of flesh tore away with the sheets. Pus flowed from the wounds, and the smell became unbearable. His body was washed in silence. Many turned away and vomited directly into the cell. The doctors ordered that embalming begin immediately. It turned out to be almost impossible. His stomach was swollen, and gurgling could be heard inside. When it was cut open, a liquid gushed out with such a stench that one of the scribes lost consciousness. The doctors tried to pour wine and herbal decoctions inside, but the tissue would not hold, and everything leaked out. The body had already begun to decompose. The report noted, embalming was unsuccessful. The smell of decay is spreading throughout the monastery. He was carried out at night to avoid causing a commotion, but rumors still spread. They said that the bishop had died without his pants on, just as he had been found at the onset of his illness, and that God had revealed his sins. Crowds in the city whispered, "He left as he lived, in disgrace." After his death, a storm broke out. Several wills appeared at once, each contradicting the other. The old nobility claimed that he had recognized their heir. The new entourage showed papers with different signatures. Envoys from neighboring countries threatened to intervene if their candidate was not accepted. The monastery turned into a battlefield. Several servants who had kept records of his last days were found dead. It was said that they had been killed to hide the truth about the forgery. Priests argued, some claimed that he had died without repentance, others that his last breath had been a prayer. The people saw his death as a sign of punishment. In the markets, they said it was punishment for debauchery and cruelty. The government was shaken. For several months, England was filled with rumors and fear. Each camp presented the bishop's last will. Clashes broke out in the cities. Monks who had survived his illness wrote in their chronicles, "The smell of his body remained within our walls. Even after death, he divided people and sowed discord." Thus ended the life of the bishop who once held the fate of the nation in his hands. His death did not bring peace. It left only a stench, forged documents, and war between those who divided his power.